Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 343 of the Prancing Pony podcast where, well, one must stop somewhere. In this case, take a break and do some live Q&A.
Woohoo! All right. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I am Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and I am here with the man of the West, who is hoping just for some really easy questions tonight, folks. Alan Sisto.
I promise I'll have no such luck. I see who's here. All right, folks, join us as we welcome a few of our patrons to join us for our 28th quarterly Questions After Nightfall.
You've been doing this for 28 years. This is incredible.
Do the math, Don. Do the math.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
It's still 7 years worth of them. And I think it was because we also didn't always do them in the third quarter. We typically end up doing like 3 a season. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you are skimping out for the first few. I see how it is, but we got to ramp that up. That's okay.
We didn't do them for the first year because we didn't even know what we could do.
Well, you've got a huge audience of really awesome people, and they have our questions for us. No matter how you got here, whether it is through Alan, through me, through any number of the wonderful guests, hosts, you are all welcome here in the common room here at the Prancing Pony podcast, where, as you know, we are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth, just not the trilogy, because we have done that already. We are into the good stuff and now the Q&A. So we've got plenty of speculation and, as the folks in the live audience know, some terrible dad jokes from me along the way.
Well, we try. We do love our deep dives into the lore, though, discussing our favorite themes and a whole lot more. Now, once a quarter, though, we take a break from our read-through of the Legendarium, and we welcome a few of our patrons to join us here in the common room and bring along some of their very best questions.
We have no idea what they are going to ask, so as we've done many times before, we are simply going to do our best job to answer the question or type really fast on Google without anybody noticing, because what we have in our shelves and our teeny tiny brains may not be enough.
It may not. Folks, as with previous Questions After Nightfall episodes, aside from any possible edits for nervous coughs and time spent flipping through pages as we look for an answer, we will be presenting this as it was recorded live. So everything you hear in this show will have been recorded during this session. In other words, Don, we're not going to be able to go back, find the answer, come in tomorrow and re-record the answer. That's not going to happen.
I have Jordan's cell phone number and I can bribe him. So you're welcome.
All right. Give it a try.
All right. If you would like to be on one of these podcasts with us sometimes, you can join us for the Fellowship of the Podcast at patreon.com/prancingponypod. Questions After Nightfall episodes are recorded in front of a live studio audience once a quarter, and patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium tier and higher are invited to join.
Indeed. It's just one of the ways that we try to show our appreciation to those who support the show, giving them the opportunity to join us, make us laugh, make us think, and occasionally, or maybe every single time, embarrass us, hopefully in a really good, positive way. Let's go ahead and get started. Dawn, who's up first?
First up is Joshua.
Joshua, welcome back, Joshua.
Good evening, Alan and Don. It's a pleasure to be back.
Pleasure to have you.
All right, so tonight my question is, when Sauron first puts on the One Ring, the wielders of the 3 elven rings were made aware of him. Right. When Frodo puts on the One Ring in the Sammath Naur, do you think Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf were made aware of his claim on the ring? It doesn't seem that when Frodo uses it in the past that they were made aware, but when Frodo claims it, do you think that would register with them?
Ooh, that's a great question. My immediate reaction is no, because Frodo does not have the power level of someone like Sauron. I kind of rank Middle-earth in terms of things that they can do to make my day worse. So like humans, dwarves, no magical powers, but could beat me up in a fight. Elves, a little bit more magic powers, telepathy, all that jazz. Then, Maiar, then Valar, then Eru Ilúvatar. For my money, I feel
and
like
then
Frodo,
Don Marshall.
Stop it. No, it's Tom Bombadil and then Bill the Pony at the very top.
Yes. I like your theology here in Middle-earth.
Thank you. My guess is that Frodo doesn't have the mental capacity to know the true power of the ring, to wield it, and so it just naturally enhances his own abilities, which are not to dominate the will of all men. Sam wants to, he puts on the ring and he wants to make the world a giant garden. Frodo, rest of the hobbits, Isildur disappearing, feel like that's just a weird side effect of a strange medication, but in this case the medication is a small circular weapon of mass destruction.
Weapon of mass destruction, indeed.
Yeah.
I think my initial thought is along your lines. I was thinking, oh, he doesn't have the power. I mean, the reason that the Elven Ring bearers were aware of Sauron putting on the One Ring was because all of a sudden they were crushed overwhelmingly by this powerful evil presence. So I was thinking, yeah, you're right. But then I remembered a couple of moments, and one of them I'm going back to right now. This is in the chapter, The Mirror of Galadriel. So this is right after we get nuclear Galadriel, and she passes the test, says, I'm going to diminish and go into the west. We read this. They stood for a long while in silence. At length the lady spoke again. Let us return, she said. In the morning you must depart, for now we have chosen, and the tides of fate are flowing. And Frodo has a question. He says, I would ask one thing before we go, a thing which I often meant to ask Gandalf in Rivendell. I'm permitted to wear the One Ring. Why cannot I see all the others and know the thoughts of those that wear them? And Don, this actually fits right in with what you've said, that he doesn't have the power, right? She goes, basically before you could use that power, you need to become far stronger, train your will to the domination of others. But look at what she says at first. Only thrice have you set the ring upon your finger since you knew what you possessed. How does she know that? How does she know that he has put the ring on 3 times? Unless she's been aware of the fact that he's put the ring on.
Oh my God, they knew the whole time.
I think she did.
Oh my God.
I think she did. And similarly, think about the moment on Amon Hen when Frodo puts on the ring to escape from Boromir. And I'm not going to be able to find that passage as well as this one. This is the one that I knew I wanted to find the actual quote for. But Gandalf is aware that there's a struggle going on. So Gandalf is absolutely yelling at Frodo, take it off. Don't be stupid. Take the ring off. He is aware that Gandalf is aware that Frodo has put on the ring. So I think in those cases, we have evidence to suggest that 2 of the 3 bearers of Elven Rings are aware of Frodo putting on the ring. I don't know about Elrond. I don't think there's any evidence that suggests one way or the other, but I can't imagine that he wouldn't have been if both Gandalf and Galadriel were. So
okay.
That's a tough one.
You've blown my mind and completely shifted my perspective on it. I feel like every time I come on this podcast, I get to learn something new or just have my mind completely blown.
That's actually one of my favorite things about these questions after Nightfall. Don't tell any of these people, but I actually usually learn something in one of these episodes from people here. Yeah.
They all have headphones and it can hear you right now.
Oh, shoot. That's right. They're muted, but they can still hear me, can't they?
All right.
Yep.
That is a wonderful question, Joshua, and one that I will now consider significantly more often. So thank you for putting that in my brain. Should we move on to question 2?
Yes, I think we should.
Let's do it. Next up, we have Marie.
Marie, welcome.
Thank you. My question is probably something you'll touch on when you do the appendices, but I've always been fascinated by the character of Silmarion, who was the firstborn child, I believe, of the 4th king of Numenor, but because she was female, could not take the throne. But she ends up founding the house of Andúnië, which Aragorn is descended from. So the true line of rulers of Numenor obviously go through Silmarion. My question is, how do you think Numenor would have been changed if Silmarion had been allowed to take the throne as the first ruling queen?
Ooh, I like that question a lot. And of course, we will get to that. We're going to be talking about Numenor in the very early part of the appendices this season. And of course, I've been spending a little bit of time thinking this through because of the Rings of Power, right? I mean, we see Pharazôn and Miriel, and we're getting to see this whole thing. And because in today's Tolkien Times, the last 3 series, I've been reading through Aldarion and Arendis, which it was Aldarion who changed the law to allow the eldest child, even if it was a daughter, to inherit the scepter. So yeah, Silmarion, the first child of Tar Elendil, the 4th king of Numenor, and as you said, Marie, the founder or the mother of the first lord of Andúnië, where of course all the faithful were that would end up facing off against the king's men, that would end up being the true line that should have been. Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, Marie, I'm going to do something I don't know if I've ever admitted publicly, let alone on a podcast with guests. I had no idea who you were talking about just then. I am on Tolkien Gateway right now because I was like, okay, hang on. I know there's someone that sounds like the name of Silmarillion somewhere in the Legendary. Had no idea the time frame or the lord or the lady of who. I was like, what is this? This is, I've done a speed read of all of this. This is wild.
So while I'm talking, you've been boning up on who Silmarillion is and getting your second age, education on agnatic primogeniture.
Yes. Wow. The word choice in the last 30 seconds has been wild. Thank you, Alan. The level of depth that I did not realize that the lines of Numenor went into, I already knew that I didn't know a lot. This is fascinating. So thank you for educating me. And my answer is, I think with a woman on the throne, things would be a lot less violent.
It is an interesting question. I mean, I'd have to look through who the Lords of Andunier were during the times where we actually had some really good kings, because we did have some good kings of Numenor. It's not like we went straight to Pharazôn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't help but think that the fall, I don't necessarily mean the downfall of Numenor, the sinking of Numenor, but the fall of the kings, the descent into jealousy of the elves and the hunger and desire for immortality. I can't help but think that would have at least slowed had the line of the Lords of Andunier been the ruling line the entire time. So therefore it might have happened later.
So Silmarillion was given the Ring of Barahir, the thing that Aragorn wears in the trilogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and hear me out.
Okay.
Usually, people that have that specific ring are marked as like the really good guys, or in this case, the really good women.
Yeah.
This feels like one of those things that Tolkien is saying like, probably should have been her. Probably should have been her. It's not exactly, but probably should have been her. That's my take on it anyway. Yeah.
Speaking of the ring, I think we also need to look at the Elendilmere, because that began with her as well. The tradition that she was given a mithril fillet that she wore, that would become part of the Elendilmere. A stone would be added to it. It would become the sign of royalty. And of course, part of the kingdom of Arnor, down the road after the realms in exile. Yeah, I'd have to look at the line. I do feel like it could only have been good, but then again, it's sort of like those questions like, well, what if Feanor hadn't chased Morgoth, for the Silmarils? Okay, yeah, what if Feanor had been like, yeah, you know what, you're right, let's take our time. Okay.
That's
then
easy
what?
to do with, exactly. That's easy to do with like major characters, because like there's no world where Feanor doesn't go on a rampage every time
There's
after
no
Morgoth.
world where
For
Feanor
characters like this, for characters like this where we don't get a lot of detail, I feel like arguments can be made either way. But that is an excellent question, Marie.
In a way, there's something to be said for the fact that the Lords of Andunier could be the faithful and be the rightful line, because they really are the rightful line. And sort of, in a way, sheltered from the decisions made by the Kingsmen versions of the kings, the Autonomir, and obviously down the road Pharazôn. What happens if one of them leads a force into Middle-earth and captures Sauron, right? I mean, does that even happen? Does Numenor end up being the expansionist imperial power that goes and sort of subjugates the Dunlendings and the native inhabitants of Middle-earth and exploits the environment and deforests and denudes, most of Arnor? I don't know. I can't help but think that at the very least, Middle-earth has a few more trees. The Umbar is not quite as empowered, because they don't have as much. There's not that enmity between the Kingsmen and the good guys, the faithful. But boy, let's remember that as much as I like to beat up on Eldarion, he's not of her line, so he wouldn't have been king. So who would have been? Would they have helped Gil-galad? Would they have saved the elves when they needed saving? I don't know. Man, this is an interesting what if. Because there's so many chains that happen after that.
Marie has something else to follow up on. Marie, go ahead.
I've always been fascinated by some of the side characters, and I've always found her just having those heirlooms of the Edain very telling. And I actually did my version of her for Alep, the last Alep.
And for those who don't know, Alep is a long expected party. It's a gathering of, Tolkien fans, and a lot of it involves cosplay and dressing up and all of this, which is probably why I've never been. Thank you, Marie. That was great. I really appreciate the question and the input on that, because these side characters that Tolkien fleshed out so thoroughly, so well, are always so very interesting. And she's a very interesting character, to be sure. All right, well, before we get to the next question, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come right back. Now, soon we're going to get back to our listener questions, but before we do, we just want to remind you that there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony Podcast than just us, and boy, that's a good thing.
Very much so. The PPP has an amazing listener community, some of whom are listening to me on a call right now. They are always coming up with great questions and great discussion across all of our social media spaces. Please go check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, our Twitter, and much more.
And on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. You can follow the page to get the episodes and news, but you're going to want to join the group to get involved in those great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/PrancingPonyPod. On Twitter and Instagram, we are simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
And don't forget that my other podcast, The Rings of Power Wrap-Up, is going on right now. Within a day or so of each episode of The Rings of Power released on Amazon Prime Video, I sit down with my co-hosts there, Dr. Sarah Brown and James Tauber, and we talk about the characters, story, and lore behind the Rings of Power. All right, folks, thank you so much for waiting. We're going to go ahead and come on back to our listener questions. Dawn, who is next?
Next, we have Kevin. Kevin, go ahead with your question.
Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Dawn. It's great to be here. I have a question regarding my favorite elf, High King of the Noldor, Fingolfin. When reading the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, we read that characters such as Finrod and Glorfindel get rehoused in New Hroa pretty quickly compared to some of the other Noldor who died during the First Age. And my question is, what do you think was Fingolfin's fate after his epic battle with Morgoth in the Dagger of Briarlock in the First Age? Was he rehoused relatively quickly, like his nephew Finrod? Was he kind of more on the punishment path like Feanor, and more likely his son Fingon, who also participated in the slaughter of the Teleri? Or is he just kind of in limbo? And what do you think the difference is regarding his sacrifice compared to the other two?
Oh my. Okay. More speculation, fun speculation. Go for it, Don. What are your thoughts?
So my interpretation of this has always been that Fingolfin is really courageous, but deep down is like really tired. You don't typically challenge your mortal enemy to one-on-one combat without a little bit of desperate, like, let's just get this over with, man. Come on. I just gotta do, one-on-one, you and me. Let's end this here. Let's go. Winner takes all. Let's do this. Obviously, it didn't happen that way because it would have been a very boring.
Well, he wrote in wrath and despair. You're right. I mean, that the text tells us that despair was part of it for sure.
Absolutely. And I think to a certain degree, there's like, I always see the afterlife, the rehousing of the elves, the reincarnation, whatever you want to call it, as a way of like, all right, you're ready to come back now. But for most elves, because we don't see a lot of elves come back to Middle-earth, my bet is, for my money, I'd have him wait in the halls of Mandos for a real long time.
Really?
I think he'd come back eventually, but if Fingolfin was like truly there, like truly one of the greats of all time, like, oh my God, this most amazing thing.
Like Finrod, let's say.
Yeah. Something like along the lines of like, and then by the power of his reincarnation, he comes back really quickly and then he died. But Tolkien didn't write these characters to be like, and then he's reincarnated and then he's reincarnated over and over again. So
I will just take a quick second to say that Tolkien would not want the word reincarnated to be the way he's rehoused, rebodied. He was very specific that he didn't want it defined as or to be described as reincarnation.
No, that is totally fair. Using modern parlance,
right.
This is,
and I understand. It's like we talk about elves being immortal. He never even said that. He just talked about them being serially longeval, which is kind of, picking nits, but perfectly appropriate.
All of that is to say, I think Fingolfin's spirit for me, while valiant, is like real tired, crossed a bunch of ice growing up, and is like, I can't do it. You guys got this. It's like that really old, wise mentor in the movie that's not Gandalf, that doesn't come back, that doesn't, say, I've got another mission to do. It's like, look, I did what I could. I can't beat this guy one-on-one. You're going to have to do it without me. That's my take.
Yeah. I do imagine that he probably would have had a little bit of time there. I also think he would have wanted to take a little bit of time. He had a lot to think about, a lot to ponder, a lot to consider. Remember why he went, because you realize he didn't go because Feanor convinced him, right? He spoke against Feanor when Feanor was going off and saying, we got to leave. We're thralls. You all are thralls. I'm pretty sure Fingolfin was like me going, you don't understand what this word means. We're not thralls. But he does end up going, but he goes because he's wanting to get vengeance for his father's murder. This is not about Feanor and recovering his brother's stolen gems. This is about honoring his father and getting vengeance for his father. I actually was able to pull this up real quick. It's from the Shibboleth of Feanor, which is in the Peoples of Middle-earth. This is actually part of the history of Middle-earth, and it's not text it's technically not canonical, but man, this sounds exactly like Fingolfin. I have not rejected the Valar, nor their authority in all matters where it is just for them to use it. But if the Eldar were given free choice to leave Middle-earth and go to Aman, and accepted it because of the loveliness and bliss of that land, their free choice to leave it and return to Middle-earth when it has become dark and desecrated cannot be taken away. Moreover, I have an errand in Middle-earth, the avenging of the blood of my father upon Morgoth, whom the Valar let loose among us. Feanor seeks first his stolen treasures. So in other words, Feanor is after his possessions, his things, because that's what Feanor is all about, is the things he makes. Fingolfin is all about avenging his father's murder. And I feel like he's going to wait a little while because he did rebel against the Valar. He did end up still going, after the doom of the Noldor was spoken, right? After no herald less than Mandas himself came and spoke and said, you guys, you better turn around now. If you don't, the whole world of pain is coming down on you, right?
Dad's really mad at you. Dad's super mad at you. You need
mad,
to get your butt back into the house.
Dad will listen to you. Otherwise, we're going to turn your room into like an exercise room and a sewing room, and you're never coming back. And then we're going to build a wall, and you're going to cry, and you're going to cry, and we're not going to hear you cry. We're not going to give a darn if you cry. I mean, Mandos was really pretty, like he was laying it thick. And sure, Fingolfin decided to still go with him, right? The other brother turned around and went back, right? And Fingolfin didn't. So he is in rebellion. He is still somebody who has gone against the will of the Valar there. So he's got to have to pay for something there. But even after he was there, this was a guy who tried to do the right thing. He, still tried to maintain relations with Thingol. Even after Thingol had banned the speaking of Quenya, he still kept that friendship. He brought in men from the House of Hador who entered his service. He was actually the one who made the first Lord of Dorloman. So, I mean, he'd done a lot of good things. So I feel like, he's going to have to wait a little bit of time, but probably not too long. Probably not too long. That would be my thought. Pretty amazing character,
I like
really.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I love the fact that we can go into so much detail about these characters that get like a couple of chapters of screen time. It's lovely.
Well, it's so wonderful because I think when you dig into the histories of Middle-earth and you see all the extra goodies that you find in there, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So much good stuff.
Yeah. Well, and Tom does add, and this comes back to something I mentioned at the very beginning when you talked about his assault on Morgoth. Despair is a serious fault, and it is. It is a very serious fault, and that is something that he's going to have to be pondering, in the halls of Mandos. He's going to have to really be thinking about that. Yeah, he's going to have to wait a while, but not for too long, I don't think. All right. That was a fun question. I really like that. All right. Who is up next?
Next, we have Jerome. Go ahead with your question.
Jerome.
Hello. Hi, Alan. Hi,
Hello.
Don. Thanks again for inviting me. Question I had, this came to mind a bunch of times. At the beginning, I guess with the end of Fellowship, beginning of Two Towers, Aragorn's kind of like doubting himself a little bit, not quite movie Aragorn level doubt, but he's still doubting himself a little bit. And I'm not sure, this might just be speculation. I'll see what you thought, but he did study a lot. Well, he studied somewhat in Rivendell at some point during his life, his 88 years there. So he probably would have read some of the same tales that Bilbo did, including what would be eventually the Silmarillion, we call it anyway. Yeah. So he probably read all about Turin's story. So I'm thinking to myself, is he just thinking, I need to not screw up because I don't want to be Turin 2 and have another name? Is that really what he's thinking? Or is Or what else would he may have learned? Is that
That's a good
is that
question.
one possible thought?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you're right. I'm sure that he spent time and would have learned at the very least those great tales. He would have known. We know he knows about Beren and Luthien. Of course, he sings that song when they're on Weathertop and tells them about that story. And of course, he's going to know that story. He's also going to know about the fall of Gondolin. He's also going to know about Turin. These great tales, I'm sure. Did he consciously think, I don't want to screw up like Turin? Maybe not. I mean, that's a tough one to say that he might have had that particular thought in mind, only because for the most part, not for the only part, but for the most part, Turin's bad decisions were made under the influence of the curse of Glaurung. As we've spoken before on the show, and when Sean and I did that in first season, I still can find significant fault with Turin because there was a time when he was protected from the influence of that curse and he still made some really boneheaded calls.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that it's less a conscious thing and more of I want to try to make the right call here, right? I know that the buck stops with me. They may not all know it, but I'm the king, right? I'm the one who has to make this call. I have to make the right call, or at least the most right or the least wrong, really. In some ways, I just have to make the least wrong call here. So I don't know that it's a conscious, explicit thought about Turin as much as it is the story of Turin makes up some of the bones of the soup that he's having to think about right now. If I can paraphrase Tolkien badly, who himself was paraphrasing someone at that point, talking about the elements in a story, in terms of inspiration. So, yeah, I'm sure if somebody said, you just don't want to mess up like Turin, he goes, oh yeah, no, you're right. I don't want to mess up like that Turin guy. I mean, I'm sure it would have come to mind, but I don't think he was consciously thinking of Turin. I don't know.
This is what I love about these questions this evening, because they always give me so much to think about.
It's good.
I will equate it to this. I agree with you, Alan. I think to a certain extent there is a level of lore and influence that the stories of the First Age have over pretty much everybody in the Middle-earth legendarium, both Second and Third Age. Isildur's failure probably was Aragorn's main focus of don't wind up like that person. Mm-hmm. They're if I'm going to equate this to a family reunion, this is going to be something like, look, don't be like your grandfather. He's terrible. He gave in to weakness. Your uncle is also a mess up too, but he's not the same way as a mess up. Just don't even pay attention to what your uncle Turin is doing over there. But Isildur, you really want to not do what Isildur is doing. That's the closest equating I can do without getting too deep into the weeds.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Oh man, anything
else?
Yeah. You do have to wonder though what was going through Aragorn's mind, because he really was struggling with some doubt about those decisions that he had to make sort of under the gun.
Aragorn being called to make decisions is a core theme of his character, choosing who to go with, to go after, whether it's which hobbits basically to follow, Frodo and Sam or Merry and Pippin, choosing, at least in the movies, to be king, to take up the mantle and put aside the ranger.
Well, even in the books, choosing to go through the paths of the dead.
Yeah, same sort of deal. Same sort of deal. But yeah, I think Aragorn and choices are sort of that main theme, and he always seems to choose properly. So I feel like he, even with Turin's influence, he probably would have been
chosen poorly.
Ah, I see what you did there.
All right. Well, Don, who is up next?
Next up, we've got Jenny.
Jenny, welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be here again. Thank you. I have a fun little question for you both. When you were in the last chapter of The Lord of the Rings, sob, you were talking about the fact that when Sam left Bag End with Frodo, he didn't know where he was going. Remember that? And you said something about, remember back when you read that for the first time, you didn't know where they were going either. And you thought they were going to I beg to differ, because when I was 9 reading this book, I read every word of this book, except perhaps for some of the poetry around Boromir's death. I think I skipped some of that. But fair. I read every other word, including the chapter titles. And the chapter title is The Grey Havens. So I knew where they were going.
So you did know.
Oh.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
So it brings me to my question for you both of you. Which is your favorite chapter title in the Lord of the
Oh,
Rings?
I like that.
And which is your least favorite one? And is any of them a spoiler, like The Return of the King?
Yeah, I know. Seriously, spoilers galore.
And what does that tell us about Tolkien's storytelling?
Through the
and
titles.
he doesn't care I don't think he cares if he spoils it.
No, I mean, if you look at the Silmarillion, and I know Tolkien didn't necessarily intend to have it be published exactly like that. He makes it very clear in some elements, and the Silmarils were lost, but they're the finest jewels ever made. And then we proceed to read, 12 chapters on the Silmarils. I mean, it's he tells you right up front what's going to happen.
Right, exactly. And so I want to hear what your favorite title is, and I want to tell you mine. Mine is, but you have to say it correctly.
Okay, I will try.
It's Of Herbs.
I knew that was coming when you said correctly. I'm like, there's only one chapter I can think of. It's going to be Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit.
That's my very favorite.
Jenny, you will be happy to know I did the H pronunciation of herbs in one of our recordings a few days ago, and Alan called me out on it. It was lovely.
In a good way. I've come to sort of appreciate that. I still disagree with it, but I appreciate it. That's fair. I mean, now I'm picturing a bunch of guys named Herb hanging out with some stewed rabbits. But all right. I do love what Tolkien does in his titles. I mean, we talk about spoilers, and yes, in the Silmarillion, everything's a spoiler. But I love how with the titles of the chapters in The Lord of the Rings in particular, they're very specifically not spoilers. I'm thinking of The Departure of Boromir.
Mm-hmm.
That is just absolutely brilliant, subtle, does not tell you what happens, but tells you what you need to know initially. I do think that might be a contender for one of my favorite chapter titles. But if I'm allowed to make a two-part connection, I love how we go from an unexpected party in The Hobbit to a long expected party in Lord of the Rings. That would be my favorite, if I can make that observation. Yeah.
That is, you literally stole the words right out of my mouth. That contrast, I think, is one of my favorite things Tolkien has ever done throughout this. And I agree. I think Tolkien's chapter titles are very intentionally subtle. The departure of Boromir, Shelob's lair, the fact that there is even a titled chapter of Mount Doom. Do they make it to the end? Yes. And I've always assumed that Tolkien didn't care about spoilers because it wasn't about whether the good guys win or not. Of course they're going to win, but it's more, what is it going to cost them to achieve that victory? And so I see these chapter titles as cool. If we're using a Dungeons and Dragons metaphor, what obstacle is the author going to throw in these people's way? Well, all of a sudden there's Uruk-hai, and then there's Treebeard, and then there's the voice of Saruman. They have to go up against, they're almost like boss battles in a video game, honestly. So you have a decision to make. You're fighting in Shelob's lair. You have a choice of Master Samwise. You're going to the Forbidden Pool. These are all locations and places and deeds that, while they don't necessarily give anything away, I think it was one of those things that Tolkien was I'm going to do this.
As I'm looking at the titles again, I'm blown away by how good these are.
The book is called The Fellowship of the Ring, and anyone that looks at the table of contents is going to see the breaking of the fellowship. So you literally open the book, read the chapter titles, and go, oh, I guess they break up at the end. I wonder how this goes. Poorly. Very poorly. We tell you at the very beginning in the table of contents. It's
We noticed, or I mentioned that the whole unexpected party to long expected party. There's also mini meetings when they first get to Rivendell, and mini partings when they come back after. It's another one of those beautiful little moments that's come full circle. I think of the window on the west, and it's not just a window that looks west. It is a window into Numenor. We get a glimpse of what that would have been in Faramir. I mean, he is a window on the west. It's not just a hole in the wall looking towards the sunset. It's not that. It is Faramir himself as a window on the west. So there are so many moments of brilliance like that. And it's so hard to separate the titles from the content. I mean, I think of The Ride of the Rohirrim, the chapter, the name, of course, that's the moment. And for that moment, I am just carried away on these thundering hooves as Theoden and his men charge. So it's hard to just separate and be like, oh yeah, well that moment is in this chapter, so that's my favorite chapter title. But no, I there's so many. But yeah, That for sure, I think unexpected and long expected party. It really is hard to pick a favorite.
Excellent question. That is
it really
good
is.
stuff.
All right, Don, that was another great question from our audience. Who is up next?
Next, we have Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, welcome back.
Thank you. Always good to be here. My question is referring to Tolkien's bit of a word nerdery question. So Tolkien uses the color gray quite often when he's describing the eyes of some of his characters.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, he says gray is evening to describe Lúthien's eyes as well as those of Elrond and Arwen. We read such things as gray is a clear evening, gray is a cloudless night. But shades of deep blues are the predominant colors that I think of for evening, but not necessarily what we commonly call is gray. So is there maybe another meaning of when he says gray as far as a color?
Okay.
When he uses it.
That is a very good question. Because you're right. I think of deep blues, not gray, when I think of evening colors.
I'm going to tip my hand as a little bit of an anime nerd. But for those who partake, there's an anime called Jujutsu Kaisen with a character with very stunningly blue eyes, like clear crystal ocean, seeing all the way down to the bottom kind of blue. And the rest of the character's eyes are very intentionally not highlighted that much. And Tolkien, especially with his eyes, you look at Glaurung, the dragon who was able to hypnotize, and you see the great eye of Sauron. I feel as though like the stare, I don't know if this is a common saying, but the eyes are the windows to the soul or the gateway to a person's heart. Along those same lines, I think Tolkien associates the eye color or the look in someone's eye as very important. As far as I'm aware, gray is typically associated with things like elemental powers, water, storms, oceans. So I typically don't think of them necessarily as like piercing. The elves are described as having very piercing eyes. So I think for me, gray eyes can almost sort of be a metaphor for like, oh, there's trouble brewing, or there's power within this, or like something lurks behind the eyes that is not necessarily apparent through outward appearance. That's my take on it, though. Also, yes, Kevin brings up an excellent point in the chat. England is very rainy, so having gray eyes might just be Tolkien's nod to storm
So if it's
clouds.
the color of the sky's always gray. I'm doing a little bit of etymological research as you were doing that, right? I looked up gray, and there's nothing there that suggests a connection to blue, but there is, interestingly, some suggestions of gray in the description, the etymological history of the word blue. The Old French blue is pale, pallid, wan, light-colored, discolored, blue, and blue-gray. There's apparently the Proto-Indo-European root is from a root that also can lead to an Old Spanish word that means yellowish gray, a Welsh word that does mean gray. And as etymological dictionary says, it shows the slipperiness of definition in Indo-European color words. Many Indo-European languages seem to have had a word to describe the color of the sea encompassing blue and green and gray, such as Irish glas from Proto-Indo-European root that just means to shine, Old English, and I'm going to butcher this, I'm going to try not to, Hewen, blue, gray. So maybe there is an etymological connection, but I would almost think that you could say blue to make the gray connection, but you couldn't say gray to make the blue connection. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't think there's, I almost think I've gone up the wrong tree in this case. I almost feel like I've chased a red herring. The present spelling in English, the whole BLUE of blue, is since the 16th century, the sense lead-colored, blackish blue, darkened as if by bruising, comes to English from the way of an Old Norse cognate that is the meaning that we also see in black and blue or blue in the face. So, I don't know, there's those. Elizabeth, you've got something to say on this as well? You've got a little follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for helping with that. I always kind of wondered about that, and if maybe how there was some kind of etymological history of that word that had a different connotation, like the word fair.
Yeah.
It can just mean whole and beautiful and not necessarily light.
Doesn't necessarily mean pale or light skinned. It can just mean beautiful. It can also just mean equitable. Yeah, I guess there's really no clear answer on this as to an etymological connection. It may just be more about the sky being that color. So interesting question, though. Do we have anybody else on the first round of questions? I think we still have both Tom and Arthur, right? Who's first of those two?
Next up, we have Tom. Tom, what is your question?
Tom, welcome, sir.
It's interesting because somebody actually asked this question the other day on Facebook on the Prancing Pony. I didn't get a chance to read through it, but somebody asked it. So, when Gandalf dies on, top of Xeroxigil, what happens to his body? Does the same thing happen to his body that happens to Saruman's body? And because we know he dies, and then he leaves the world, and then he comes back, and he's sent back. So does he get a whole new thing? Or is it a resurrection of the body that's there? Yeah. Or is it a complete new rehousing? So that's because, of course, even though he was a Maiar who'd become incarnate, that's not the same thing as being a man or an elf or a dwarf or something like that.
But it's also different from a raiment, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. The challenge is it's a step between normal mortal man and the raiment of Avala or the raiment of Amaya. Yeah. Ooh, so what happened to his body? Well, it's a cold mountain. Maybe it's still frozen up there like some of those poor climbers on Mount Everest. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. How unfortunate that would be to stumble upon.
So hear me out. I think Gandalf is resurrected into the same body at the top of Xeroxigil and is then flown by the Eagle Gwaihir from the mountain to Lothlorien, because I think something along the lines of Gandalf pursues the Balrog and he casts it down, and I believe the phrase that Tolkien used is passed away or passed into something there, but the next quote is something along the lines of Gandalf returns to life. And so in my mind, because of the series of events, he comes back to life on top of the mountain because of a heat source that he has on him, Ring of Fire, and that's my sort of Ring of Fire. Thank you, Johnny. I think personally, Ring of Fire keeps him alive, and the body heat obviously he's like dead in big air quotes because this is an audio podcast.
He's only mostly dead.
Honestly, yeah, that is probably as close to what we're going to get for Gandalf as we possibly can. So the Ring of Fire keeps his body temperature warm.
Okay.
Elf god magic brings him back to life. The eagle is like, hop on, and then they go to Lothlorien.
I'm going to cheat and go to a letter because I think Tolkien's letters give us a little bit more that's just fun to hang around. Like, okay, let's bandy this about. I like what you're saying. I don't disagree.
Let's do it.
So letter 156, he talks a little bit. Well, he actually answers a lot of really good questions in there. But in that letter, he actually speaks of Gandalf. And in this, he says, in his condition, meaning Gandalf's condition of being an incarnated body, like you said, maybe not a mortal man in the most literal sense, but not just a raiment. In that condition, Tolkien writes, it was for him a sacrifice to perish on the bridge in defense of his companions, less perhaps than for a mortal man or hobbit. So once again, we get that distinction that he's not quite up to that level. And the reason why it's not quite as much of a sacrifice is because Tolkien says he had a far greater inner power than they. At the same time, Tolkien argues that it's also more of a sacrifice because it was a humbling and abnegation of himself in conformity to the rules, because for all he knew at that moment, Gandalf was the only person who could direct the resistance to Sauron successfully. And Tolkien writes, and all his mission was in vain. He was handing over to the authority that ordained the rules and giving up personal hope of success. Okay, now that we have that as backdrop, let's talk about the sacrifice, right? Not only does he say that he sacrificed himself to perish on the bridge, so he did perish. He says later in that same letter, Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. So then how do we get what happens to his body? I think we get a little bit of an explanation here about the return. He says, first of all, I was the enemy of Sauron. This is before he departs. He sums himself up. I was the enemy of Sauron. He might have added, for that purpose, I was sent to Middle-earth. But by that, he would at the end have meant more than at the beginning. He was sent by a mere prudent plan of the angelic Valar. Okay, that is to say his first appearance, right, in Third Age 1000, along with the other Astari, was just a mere prudent plan of the Valar. But authority, and Tolkien writes this with a capital A, so we're talking about Eru, had taken up this plan and enlarged it at the moment of its failure. Naked I was sent back, he's quoting Gandalf there, naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. Sent back by whom and whence? Not by the gods, whose business is only with this embodied world and its time, because Gandalf passed out of thought and time. That's the line I think you were trying to think of, that he passed out of thought and time. And then Tolkien writes, naked is, alas, unclear. Okay, in other words, the part about, Gandalf saying, naked I was sent back. Well, what does he mean by that? Tolkien explains it was meant just literally unclothed like a child, not discarnate. So in other words, he was reincarnate, right? He was put back into a flesh body, ready to receive the white robes of the highest. Tolkien writes that Galadriel's power is not divine. His healing is no more than physical healing and refreshment. So he wasn't spiritually healed there. The spiritual part was handled in the timeless halls with Eru. So what happened to his body is, like you said, he leaves his body remained, and he's then put back in his body. He's not discarnate anymore. He was only discarnate for a little time, passing out of time and space. Otherwise, you're talking about an entirely new body, in which case there's an old body right there next to him, which would be really creepy, looking over and spotting your dead body next to you. I tend to think same body.
Wow.
That's my gut feeling on that.
I was going to make a new body who dis joke.
New body who dis. I like that, actually. That's good.
That's good.
But that makes sense, because that joke, because I think the naked part shows you that it is a new body, because what happened to the clothes? And so saying new body who dis, he does say, yes, Gandalf. That's who I was. That's who I was. You could call me Gandalf.
Yeah.
So
maybe. That's interesting.
It's just an interesting thought. That's something you think about.
Yeah. It's interesting though that he would reincarnate him, or in this case, literally to incarnate a second time, Gandalf, that Iluvatar would choose to do that on top of Zirak-Zigil instead of just popping him back into Lorien.
Hey, look, you're giving the guy a brand new body. You can't expect everything.
Like clothes?
Right, yeah.
Hey, God.
Well, the other body, he could have used the clothes that were on the other body. Because he's wearing gray rags, right? So he had to strip his body and,
man, I love it. Naked is, alas, unclear. Yeah.
Do you ever think sometimes we put too much thought into Tolkien?
No such thing. No such thing. How dare
simultaneously
you?
Not enough. Yeah, not enough thought. It's like, hey, you guys think Gandalf was naked on top of a mountain for a few weeks? Let's talk about, this is why I love this podcast so much. There's just so much.
That's right.
Now, you see,
brilliant.
What would tell you we were putting too much thought into it is if we said, well, okay, Frodo's parents both drown in the river. Mm-hmm. Sam jumps in the river and sinks. Everybody figures that Mad Baggins fell in a pond and drowned.
Right.
Are hobbits negatively buoyant?
Hobbits may be chubby,
that's our show,
but
everybody.
It must not be actual fat, because they must
sink like a stone.
I'm so sorry. I've lost my ability to go.
Man, that is hilarious. They're just highly dense. They're like planetary material,
They probably go head down too.
They probably do.
Like a toddler.
Cats always land on their feet. Hobbits always land on their heads. Yeah.
That's their least vulnerable spot.
With all the hair. Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
my
man.
wife's asleep. I got to be quiet.
All right, Don. Yeah. Somehow you got to pull this together and tell me who's next.
Okay, well, sinking to the bottom of the question pool, just like the Hobbits, is Arthur. Arthur, go ahead with hopefully your question about clothes or buoyancy.
I will only say that at the bottom of the water you'll find the Watcher. It's good to be back. I will put a pin in the question I was originally going to ask, which is, given Tolkien's experience in World War I, when Legolas drew back his bow and shot down the flying enemy, was it in fact a Sopwith Camul? I'm not going to ask that.
No, a Sopwith Camul.
Not going to go there. But I have a question that may spark a little discussion. based on a lot of discussions I've had with people, and I've thrown out questions and quoted text, and someone says, well, it doesn't really matter what it says in the text, because 20 years later, Tolkien scrawled this on a napkin, and that supersedes it. Where do we define canon, and where do we draw the line? I mean,
oh goodness, yeah.
Obviously, we don't call Frodo Bingo anymore. We don't call Celeborn, well, you know.
Actually, I call him Teleporno all the time. That's my favorite name for him.
How do we define canon?
Yeah, boy, you're asking a sticky question, aren't you, man?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. How do we define canon? I think we might be able to define the outer limits, like to say, well, it's at a minimum this and it is at a maximum this, but where does it lie in between? That's a tough one. I think the argument can be made, Don, that the only things that are truly canon in Middle Earth are The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, published in Tolkien's lifetime. That's it. It's tough to say that the Silmarillion is canonical because Tolkien it's not finished. It's edited by Christopher. I still view it as canonical, but then you get into questions like, the origin of orcs, and you realize, oh man, the origin of orcs that's in the Silmarillion is really probably not where Tolkien officially landed. So what's canonical? Oh, Dawn, do you have an answer? Can you save me from this canonical nightmare?
We would have to start another podcast and only discuss death of the author.
There you go.
That is the if you boil it down to everything, the question, what is canon within Tolkien, asks you, the reader, at what point is the story that someone put onto a piece of paper and made into a book and got the book published? Because then you have a question about, well, what about fan fiction? What about novellas? What about books by other authors if the other author has died? You look at Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson for The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
By that logic, the last 3 books of The Wheel of Time aren't canon because, Brandon Sanderson wrote them and not Robert Jordan. And so, but Robert Jordan also left extensive notes, and his wife, I believe, got Brandon Sanderson signed on. And I believe, I may be incorrect about this, but Robert Jordan may have picked Brandon Sanderson as the person to supersede him or to succeed him. I don't know if that is true or not, but I think there's a certain level of, for me at least, personal canon.
So head canon.
Head canon is super important, I think, to Tolkien because there's so many discrepancies, and
because his canon varied from day to day on some things.
Exactly. This is a big reason why I give so much grace to Rings of Power, because there's 4 different origin stories for Galadriel. There's 2 different names for each of the blue wizards, right? Sauron was a giant cat that talked in the First Age before any of this even happened. But to say that we have a definitive answer to like what happens in the Lord of the Rings, that's like what happened in real life. What happened in that person's version of history? Like, were they freedom fighters or were they terrorists? It's a certain point of view.
It is an interesting question. I'm not trying to say that Tolkien's words are as important as Holy Scripture, but it took the Council of Flippin' Nicaea to try to figure out what was biblical canon.
Yeah.
And that's just one religion in the world. I don't know about the others well enough to say anything, so I'm not going to. But if it took a Council of Nicaea to figure out what the Bible was saying for Christians, then what in the world is it going to take for Tolkien scholars to gather in a council of, Rivendell, Elrond's second council, I suppose, and we could figure out exactly what is canon, and that'll never happen, of course. I think the argument is the canon is at least as large as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and the appendices.
I would agree.
And the index, and anything that Tolkien wrote in his lifetime intentionally distributed. So I'm going to actually include the nomenclature in that because he intended for that to be used in people's work in translating it. So anything that's there is canonical. But boy, then you struggle. Arthur, you have something to follow up on with that.
Yes, the most specific example of this relates to the the Wonder Twins, those two people that are related to Arwen
Yes.
that no one ever talks about.
Eladon and Elrohir, yes.
Because it says very specifically at several points in the text, to the children of Elrond was given a choice to depart with him or to stay and become mortal. And we know from the prologue that when Celeborn goes to Rivendell before he heads west, he stays with the Sons of Elrond. He stays
with his grandchildren, right.
And so the Sons of Elrond did not depart with Elrond, and yet people will tell me, oh, there's a mention in a letter that maybe they stayed a few years or that elf years or whatever. And I'm going to say that my personal theory is if Tolkien didn't go back and rewrite and do a new edition, the published edition has to supersede anything else.
So leave with, in your mind, literally means leave at the same time as leave simultaneously with.
Depart with, not depart after or depart similarly. Depart with.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, okay, even if setting aside the letter, setting aside any extra canonical information that might say otherwise about Eladon and Elrohir, the argument could be made that he's not quite being clear enough, legally to require that they go on the same boat. But I don't know. I certainly hear what you're saying, and it makes logical sense. Tom, you want to jump in on this? Hey, maybe together we can all figure out what's canon. No. Let's not try to do that.
This is kind of like when Mablung came after Turin, or Belek came after Turin, and Turin looked at them and said, "There aren't enough of you to take me alive, so you're going to have to kill me."
That's right. There are not enough of us here to figure out what
badass line in the entire Legendary.
It really is. I love that.
I think Arthur is right. I mean, as far as to depart with. On the other hand, Aragorn certainly thinks that Arwen is still capable of departing. Yeah. Okay, but I do agree, as far as it goes, that what's published, that the published text of the Lord of the Rings has more authority than anything he said 15 years later in a letter.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with that.
That's what I mean. If it's a choice between this, the published text of the Lord of the Rings, or something he said in a letter in 1962.
And it would always be the most recent version of it that's published. So the second edition of the Lord of the Rings would supersede the first edition of the Lord of the Rings.
Right, yeah. So
I would argue that it's the same thing with The Hobbit, right? I mean, but of course he came up with the frame narrative to explain why there's a difference with the Hobbits between the first edition and second edition. Basically, yes. Bilbo lied.
Yes.
So that works. And it's canonical that Bilbo lied because that's in the prologue to the Lord of the Rings.
One thing I just want to say more is that as far as intent of the author is concerned, I believe the author intends every word he writes, but yes. I don't believe he necessarily intends everything that ends up written. Because think of how Tolkien says, like in a letter in 55 or something, I never realized how much the theme of the Lord of the Rings was death until I reread it.
Yes, exactly.
So there was stuff in there that he didn't realize he was putting in.
Yeah.
So, but still, he wrote it. And
and so I think we can use things like the letters to determine what he's said in the Lord of the Rings and figure out what canon really means. I mean, if there's a phrase that he says in the Lord of the Rings that we're not quite sure of, that he clarifies in the letters, the phrase is still canonical. The explanation is extra canonical, but it tells us what it means, and that's helpful.
It's like wings like shadow like wings.
Exactly. Shadow like wings.
Oh, no.
Jerome, I see a big grinning face over there. You've got something to say. Jump in.
Is it germane to the conversation that The Hobbit wasn't originally intended as part of the Legendarium?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. That's why I was thinking that's the second edition where he did retcon it into being part of the Legendarium. Because, if we're talking about things that he published in his lifetime, then we would have to say that the most recent things supersede the older things. In this case, the second edition of The Hobbit, which is intended to be part of that Legendarium, supersedes the first one, which was not. Because at the same time, he never incorporated, Smith of Wootton Major. That's not part of Middle Earth. So it wouldn't be part of the canon of Middle Earth, even though it was a book he published in his lifetime. But yeah, second edition of The Hobbit supersedes the first. So yeah. But boy, this is such a sticky question, Arthur, man. Why do you have to throw the hard ones at me? Huh? Why are you going to give us the hard questions?
This is what I get paid for. And this is why the brothers say, no one talks about us staying in Middle Earth. Arwen chose mortality. Arwen looks like Luthien. Arwen knows how to make a flag. Arwen got Glorfindel's lines. Arwen. Who also told Aragorn when he said, "You can change your mind," she said, "No, that decision was made a long time ago."
Yeah, on the hill of Keter Amroth. Once she plighted her troth, it was over. It was done. The decision was made. Great question, Arthur. Absolutely unanswerable. The best kind of question, really. Thank you. So, folks, that's the first round of questions. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with a second round. It may not be a full round, but we'll get through some more fun stuff when we come back. Now, folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the PPP by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. Folks, it is what gives me the ability to keep working on making this show better every year in terms of growing the team, giving them more tasks so that I can do what only I can do. When you join, you get the very best Discord community around. That includes live episode recordings, hangouts every month. You get episode postscripts. You can get ad-free episodes, free merch, and so much more.
You can also join us here and become a part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please, please consider recommending us to your friends. Now we're going to go ahead and get back into the questions. This is round 2, so who's got a question for us? Just go ahead. Arthur, you were last in the first round. You're first in the second round. Fire away. What do you have for me?
This is just speculation tossed out just for thought. Last month, we took a vacation to Europe and went to a little town in southeast Germany called Berchtesgaden, where we found a little small fortified town at the foot of a mountain where Hitler's chief lieutenants had their residence. And then we took climbed a very steep road up the mountain through a dark tunnel and came to Hitler's lair. And it had never occurred to me until taking that trip, because the knowledge of this was known after World War II, whether Tolkien was thinking of this when he described Shelob's lair, because it just seems just so similar.
That's a very good point.
I am sure that Tolkien drew a lot of inspiration despite not liking the sort of allegory for World War II. But I think in terms of the creepiness and the tunnels, I am going to tap on a staple of mine, World War I. So if anyone here has seen the television show Peaky Blinders, it tells the story of a man who is basically a criminal mob boss in the 1920s in England. And before he was a crime boss, he worked in the tunnels during World War I. He was a tunneler. And the way they visualize the tunnels very much reminds me of the way Shelob's lair is. It's cramped, it's dark, it looks like it has been carved out of the rock and stone by a beast. There are, they quite literally used the dead to sometimes prop up various, sinking places within the trenches, within the tunnels. All of that sort of happens. So I personally don't see it as a World War II reference. That being said, I don't know a lot about the specific entrance, but the love that Tolkien had for like nature and like the natural world and seeing those sorts of things be created, I think probably lended a little bit of inspiration or credence to the whole concept of this tunnel is super creepy.
I'm thinking to the timeline of when he wrote that. So if you look in the history of Middle Earth and we look at the timing of that, Christopher believes that the chapter was written in May of 1944. I don't know that information on Eagle's Nest was available that early. I would have thought that would have been something that would have been found out after the war. And so to me, I just don't think it's a possible source for Tolkien in terms of Shelob's lair. It certainly is creepy and it fits, and, an all-consuming evil, living in the tunnels. There we go. But yeah, I think just the timing alone rules it out. And I would be much more comfortable looking to a World War I inspiration, simply because so much of what we see, especially in that last part of the story, from the dead marshes and the blasted wastes of the plains of Mordor, definitely remind you of World War I and the things that Tolkien would have experienced. So I wouldn't be surprised there.
Yeah, good question. Good question. Next up, we have Marie.
Okay, so another speculation question. Obviously, it'd be hard to name a person, but who do you think led the people at Dunharrow since Éowyn left them in lurch?
I mean, obviously the book doesn't give us a specific answer. We know that all the battle-capable men would have gone off, so I'm imagining one of the men who is closest to that family that is maybe too old to go fight, somebody who's led, maybe been an advisor or a lord of some kind under Theoden, would be my first thought. Dawn, do you have anybody off the top of your head that you think might have been a good fit for filling in?
Not off the top of my head. It really seems as though the Rohanian people are very much an all people go all at once, and then you can just forget about the rest of us because the battle's happening over there and you're over here.
Fair enough. Marie, you've got something you want to jump in on.
Okay, first of all, I want to make sure that people understand. I do love Éowyn as a character, but she did abdicate her responsibility. And also, I have some headcanon that one of Theoden's other sisters, not the two that were born in Gondor, but the other one that, besides Theoden, was the one that stepped up.
I like that. That's actually a headcanon I could adopt. Yeah, because this is one of those ones where there just isn't a clear answer, and I'm not sure that there's an answer that's satisfactory, but I do like the idea that one of Theoden's sisters would have stepped up and led the people. Don, do you have any objection to that? Should we decide that is our headcanon?
The defense rests, Your Honor.
All right. Marie, your motion is seconded and approved, and we now have one of Theoden's sisters having stepped up.
Fantastic.
So saith one, so saith us all. All right. Don, who do we have next here in the second round?
Battlestar Galactica references. I love it. Elizabeth, you are up next with the next question.
All right, thank you. All right, this is also a speculation question. So in the Voyage of Eärendil, Eärendil and Elwing arrive in Valinor, and they're given the choice to choose between being the firstborn or Viadine, and of course, Elwing chooses to be numbered with the firstborn, and Eärendil, to be with her, makes the same choice, lets her have that choice.
Yeah.
But then it says, though his heart was rather with the kindred of men and the people of his father. So my question is, why do you think he would have made that choice when he was raised in Gondolin? So he's been surrounded by elves, and even though his father was mortal, Tuor was raised by elves. Those were his people. That was that was his whole experience. His family, his friends would have been all elvish. So where do you think he would have made that choice?
Trauma.
Yeah.
That's
a little bit of that.
My immediate reaction is sometimes when you hang out with people enough in your life and you're like, oh, this isn't for me. I can't do this immortality thing forever. There's too much going on. And if given the choice, I will go. It's
he might have felt he might have strongly felt that difference.
Yeah.
There in Gondolin. Yeah. I also think there might have been an element of romanticizing. He would not have had that exposure to the group of men from which he was descended, but Tuor would have told him these stories, and he would have heard about all these doings and all these acts of heroism. He wouldn't have heard about all the terrible stuff that went on, because of course those aren't the stories that Tuor would tell him. So he would grow up sort of idolizing these people that he never met, whereas he's living day to day with these elves. So I think there might be an element of that as well. But I think, Don, you're onto something too. Just the idea that here he is, mortal in a way, actually mortal, period. We know that even a drop of human blood would make him mortal. So he's mortal, and he's going to feel different. He's going to feel not necessarily ostracized. I mean, after all, he's the son of Tuor and Idril. He's going to be, it's not like he's completely on the outs, but I think there is something along those lines.
Yeah, there's a certain level, I think, of Tolkien implying that like there is this sort of family dispute, which, so often happens. Some sort of traumatic event happens, like maybe your mother turning into a bird, or your father saving the world on a flying boat, or a giant dragon nearly destroying your entire kingdom that makes you go...
Or maybe a bunch of elves coming and trying to kill your family.
Who's to say really what the initiating decision was? But I think a big deciding factor is, wow, everything here is nuts, and I don't know what to do. I'm out.
Yeah.
Bye.
And that would have been his decision, but then he ends up choosing to defer to his wife's choice. you know?
I'm sure there's at least one person listening to this that went, I guess my parents were kind of crazy, and I'm very glad I listened to my wife. There's something there. There's some, and don't get me wrong, Elrond's a great guy. I'm sure he was a good brother. I'm sure their parents tried their, Idril and
Tuor and
Tuor, and all of them. I'm sure they did as best they could. Circumstances weren't great for raising a child.
Oh, you're thinking of Earendil and
oh, excuse me. Yes, I am. I'm sorry. So
I thought you meant Tuor and Idril talking about Earendil's parents. We're talking about Elrond's parents, who are, of course, Earendil and his wife, Elwing.
In general, that lineage hasn't done the best job of keeping their kids safe in general. So
some validity
there's
there.
There's something there.
I wonder, though, had he chosen to be counted among mortal men, would that have mattered? I mean, he was doomed to pilot Vingalot forever and ever. I mean, this is like the Flying Dutchman, but with a big, bright headlight. And he can never, part of the crew, part of the ship. He can't leave. He's stuck.
No.
And if he's mortal, does it matter? Don't the Valar just say, all right, mortal man, you're still going on this boat. Somebody's still got to drive the ship, man.
Part of the ship, part of the crew is getting more and more likely every day. Yeah. I think that's,
I mean, who knows what would have happened there, but he did choose what he chose. And obviously,
should we go back and look for a napkin that Tolkien may have explained it on, that he wrote it down?
Look for an extra canonical answer.
I don't know. There's so many.
Yeah, I think he would not have. I mean, I know we're like, well, would he have gotten to do that? No, if he'd been chosen as a man, he wouldn't have. Maybe Elwing would have had to captain the boat. Dang it, my husband left me, and now this is the job I've got to do for the rest of eternity.
That's one of those T-shirt. My husband saved the world, and all I got was this lousy boat, sort of thing.
Yeah, but then she would have been the one to slay on Calagon. That might have been pretty cool. All right. Well, since we're never going to be able to answer that question to anybody's satisfaction, do we have anybody else lined up for round 2, Don?
We do. Next up, we have Jerome.
Jerome, welcome back.
So you're at the Prancing Pony the Prancing Pony, really. In the dark corner of the room where Strider is, instead of Strider, there's Gandalf, and he's got his DM screen and a bunch of dice. So Gandalf is your DM. Which 3 people are you bringing to play in a party with you?
Oh.
Best question I've ever gotten.
This is a great question. Do I have a limitation on this? Is this one of those 3 people you're going to have dinner with, living or dead, like historical figures, current people, that kind of thing? Do we have any limitations?
Preferably somebody from the Legendarium, but sure.
Okay, so characters. Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, it's got to be somebody who's creative enough, right? We're not talking about an actual warrior. Like Boromir might not be the best D&D player. As much as I'd like to have him by my side, if we're going to go have a fight, I'm not sure he's going to be the best dice roller and the best at problem solving. And Gandalf's a tricky DM, so you can leave Pippin right out. Pippin is not even an option.
Pippin's my first choice. Alan.
Pippin's your first choice. Of course he's your first choice, Don. You're nuts.
I am. Especially, listen, I don't play TTRPGs all that often. I am basically a forever DM stuck in the Middle Earth world, and I like it that way. But if I want to start some drama or cause some chaos, Peregrine Took is going to be there with me.
That is actually fun, because then you want to get in under the skin of your DM, right? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to annoy your DM. So
actually, here's a hot take. I want Gandalf as my DM. I will be the first. I want Merry, Pippin, and Boromir, because those 3.
That's great.
Okay, Pippin's going to cause chaos, right?
They're all going to die before they get to level 2.
Yes, and it will be an important lesson for the next campaign they play.
There you go.
Just you gentlemen, you have to stay alive. These are called death saving throws for a reason. Move your feet, and then just like Boromir giving the fatherly advice that he never could because he died in the books. But we're here in this fantasy what if world.
Okay,
I go Boromir, Merry, and Pippin.
I want somebody who's perceptive, who can almost read Gandalf's mind. So Galadriel. Faramir. Everybody needs a little lawful evil. What if Sauron was at the table with us? He's got to play by the rules of the game. I don't know. He's not going to be great company, though. I don't want him there when the pizza shows up, because he's going to name it all to himself. Actually, that's Morgoth's trick. But yeah, I think Galadriel would basically be able to outsmart. She might be the only one around who could outsmart Gandalf.
Yeah.
Faramir, just because he's my guy, and he'd have to play I know he's a ranger of Ithilien, but you know as well as I do, if he was playing D&D, he'd be a paladin. You know
sure.
that. Yeah.
For sure.
He'd be the most lawful good dude ever, you know? Yeah.
Counterpoint?
Yeah.
Counterpoint. Give me Gandalf as the DM, and give me Círdan, Elrond, and Galadriel.
Okay. Mean, I definitely want Círdan on my team. So Círdan, Galadriel, and Faramir.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I like it. That's a lot of fun.
Chaos. Love that question.
Total fun times. That's a great question, Jerome. I love it.
Thank you, Jerome. All right. Alan, next up, we have Joshua with his question.
Joshua, what do you have for us?
Yeah, one of the things I really love as Tolkien fans is the way he's able to describe items, specifically like the artifacts. Mm-hmm. So whether it's rings or swords or staves, as fans, we end up not just wanting to read about, but it's something we want to create ourselves. And whether that's buying movie replica props or making our own interpretations of things. And so if you and Alan Jr. had a chance to both get a artifact from the Legendarium, what would you pick? So for me, for example, I love the Ring of Barahir. It's I would love to
the Ring of Barahir with the snakes entwined. And First of all, I love Alan Jr. as Don's new nickname. I think that's brilliant.
Thank you for that.
That wins some points. I'm going to let you go first because you might choose mine, but I'm willing to take that gamble. What artifact would you choose?
So I recently made the revelation that I might have been incorrect about something. So correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. Does Tuor's axe Dromborleg return to him in any of the legendary? I feel as if I remember hearing that the axe would either return to him or he could never lose it, but that might just have been my association with him and the character of Thor and Mjolnir the hammer. So I might be wrong about that. I feel as though Dromborleg is just the coolest weapon in general because it's a giant two-headed axe that I'm just going to make up in my head also glows blue.
Well, its name literally means thudder sharp, because it smote both as a heavy dint as of a club and cleft as a sword. He killed 3 Balrogs with it. It's a pretty...
He did.
Yeah, I can't blame you. But it never came back. He took it with him when he left the city, and his descendants took it with them to Numenor, but it was lost during the downfall of Numenor. So it never came back after the downfall.
I think Dromborleg, it's a very cool weapon.
That's kind of what I was about to say, though, too. There's so many good ones. I mean, all the swords are amazing. From Heddergrim, I love Theoden's sword, and actually it's my favorite of the movie props. As much as I like, Aragorn's sword. I mean, how do you not like, forged from the shards of Narsil? How do you not like the Flammifer of Westernesse? But Heddergrim is even better. But I love the story behind the Elessar. I love that there's the 2 stories behind it in terms of its creation and its powers. I love that we don't really know which one it is, but I love the idea that it came with Gandalf and he gave it to Galadriel and to use as this sort of healing. I mean, I love it. I love it because it's so symbolic in so many different ways. And then of course the fact that it was given by Galadriel to Aragorn, because in Elvish tradition, the mother of the bride gives a gift. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that would be Celebrian. And she isn't there. So Galadriel gives him the gift that would have been given to him by his bride's mother in lieu of that. And it's also his namesake. It's the Elessar. I mean, there's so many layers of coolness to that particular artifact.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So many connections and tie-ins. Oh man, I like that question a lot. That was fun.
Very good.
Because there are so many great artifacts. I mean, I was just talking about the Scepter of Innuminus and how it is the oldest. By the time Aragorn gets it, it is the oldest artifact of man in all of Middle Earth.
Love that.
Yeah, there are elven artifacts that are older, but that's so cool. The Elendil Mirror, and its story, and the idea that they found it in the safe box, basically in Saruman's place. It's just fantastic stories. And I think for me, it's those stories that make the artifacts so cool. So that's why the Elessar. All right.
Fair enough.
Do we have anybody else for a second round? Or Jenny, I think, had a question about elves. Yes, Jenny, fire away.
Yes, I have a question or a comment or a supposition about elves.
Okay.
And especially as regards to how they're depicted in the films and TV shows, and how really of all the things that are depicted on those things, they are the most disappointing to me. But that's because we need to, employ elves as actors, not humans.
Mm-hmm.
All the people playing elves are humans, so they don't seem elvish to me at all. And what I want to look at is Sam's answer to Frodo, and Frodo asks Sam, "Well, Sam, what do you think about the elves now that you've seen them?" And he describes Elfland in a very specific way, which none of the secondary material picks up on. The green is greener, the gold is golder, everything is brighter and crisper. But in the films and the movies, it's all this airy-fairy, Arthurian, misty stuff. But am I right about the reality of the elvish life, like in Rivendell or in Lothlorien, in different ways? It's more intense, it's brighter, it's not misty and murky.
That's a very good point. And you're right. That description, I'm going to pull that up so we get the actual quote. But Don, you know what I'm talking about. It's almost like we need to be seeing the elves live in HDR and the rest of us are in SDR, in terms of television and color range and dynamic range. It is. I mean, the saturation should be high and it should just look bright and bold and strong.
So here's what I will say. Have you ever been to like a really high tech like electronics store or like a Costco or a Sam's Club or a really big like food or warehouse store where they sell the giant 80-inch TVs and they're always playing these incredibly high definition things that you can like see every pore on the scorpion's body or whatever, not scorpion, but whatever animal that they have the close up on at that point. And you can just see like the beads of sweat and everything is so crystal clear versus like the television from the early 90s that was still shooting in 4x3 dimensions and the radio guy's voice announcer was coming through a little bit like this and it was just a little bit distant and you get further back. That to me is sort of how elves see everything like those department store, those store televisions. We see the world as just like, I need my glasses. We're Velma from Scooby-Doo, basically.
We're all Velma.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a challenge. And Jenny, you're right. We have to have humans portraying elves. It's sort of, the same thing that any television or film production comes into when they're trying to make creatures that are of another world. We can only base them on our humanity. We all, unless we're just doing complete CG. Yeah, I mean, I get the height. I liked some of the decisions that Jackson made to choose, tall actors, to choose actors that were sort of, in a way, I believe Peter Jackson actually used the phrase sort of androgynous. He wanted people that did not look to be necessarily overly feminine or overly masculine. And I thought that was an interesting choice, one that I could kind of see fitting maybe. People of great beauty. They were all very good looking people. That was the thing. I mean, there weren't very many ugly elves. The ugly folks got cast as humans for good reason, or maybe.
How dare you? Viggo Mortensen is right there, Alan. How dare you?
I didn't say all the beautiful people were elves, just that all the elves were beautiful people. It's a Venn diagram, my friend. It is interesting because we're seeing different choices with Rings of Power. They're all still beautiful, but they have shorter hair. They are a little bit more, they're just kind of more ordinary in some sense, but they're dressed fabulously. I mean, the costumes are out of this world. But yeah, it's tough. How do you portray that otherworldliness, that fairy? How do you portray fairy on a screen?
Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth is the story of a child during the midst of the, I believe it's the Spanish Revolution, as she fantasizes about escaping the world of war into a fantasy world, or the Civil War.
Yes, Civil War.
Yes, with the Fae and the fantastical creatures, and there are a number of sort of weirdly bizarre limbed and looking creatures that have, hands for eyes and, all of these weird stuff. But the thing that stuck out to me the most in Pan's Labyrinth are the limbs, where the limbs themselves are just a little bit too long. It's a little too much. It's just that little extra that gives it that not necessarily uncanny valley feeling. It's like,
okay.
It's kind of like that. It's the closest I can get to that sort of ethereal, yet these guys are
not human,
creepy.
though.
Not human, but not creepy. It's like a mix between, all right, let's take the hot people from the Lord of the Rings and the creepy body shapes from Pan's Labyrinth, mush them together and create. Okay.
If you say so. I'm going to have to probably pass on that. Just, I don't know.
I'll text you what I'm thinking of, but if anyone who's watched it thinks of the guy with the eyes on his hands, that's the body type I'm kind of going for. That's sort of me, naturally lanky, weirdly proportioned, and how the heck does he move like that on any given day? Even I'm not sure.
Well, I do think that we do see some of the, bright colors and things in Rings of Power. I noticed in the episode that recently aired, and I don't think I'm giving anybody any spoilers because by the time this episode airs, that will have dropped weeks before. But when the tree in Lindon is restored and we see this glowing, it lights everybody up with this warm golden light. And that maybe is sort of like the way we're actually supposed to see elves all the time. So, it's that sort of hyper saturated, big dynamic range, super bright. You almost have to shade your eyes. That would be what I'd like to see with the elves, but it's tough. It's a tough call because how do you do that without it becoming like gimmicky and overdoing it in a full cinematic thing rather than like a quick scene?
Yeah.
Tough call.
It is.
Good question though. Really good question. You're right. I think that's one of the reasons. There's so many reasons, but that's one of the reasons why Tolkien had difficulty accepting the idea that an adaptation could be made and made well, because you're creating, he's already worked super hard to create a secondary world. Putting it onto a stage or on a screen is making it a tertiary world. And it doesn't take much to take the viewer out of it as a result. Because it's already, the idea in building that secondary world, you have to have that inner consistency of reality in order to make it feel like it's the primary world. How do you do that when it's a copy of a copy, right? How do you do that when it's an adaptation of that? Because now you've got a tertiary world, and it doesn't take much to break that spell.
I never thought about it like that, but I love that analogy. Yeah, I like it. Okay.
We'll talk about that sometime because he talks about that, I believe, in On Fairy Stories, actually. I don't think that's in his letters. It's in On Fairy Stories. So we'll chat through that at some point, maybe.
Excellent.
Well, folks, believe it or not, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But please be sure to join us again next week when we begin our journey through the appendices to the Lord of the Rings as we look at the island kingdom of Numenor.
I'm so excited and how timely these will be, especially after Rings of Power giving us, at least from what I've seen, a fairly compelling episode or episodes within the Numenor story. As always, though, Alan and I want to give a huge thank you to the members of Team PPP. It's not just him and me doing this. It is editor Jordan Rannells, who I assume is just having an absolute nightmare editing this. I do apologize.
These episodes are always hard for him.
Some of that's me. We want to thank Barleyman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collin, and website guru Phil Dean.
And please take a minute to check out the prancingponypodcast.com. That's where you're going to find show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get all that new PPP merch, all the new chapter art that Megan's been putting out the last couple seasons.
Absolutely love that stuff. You will also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is a podcast about some books. So if you are interested in some books, specifically the ones we talk about, you can go to the link in our library. We get a small amount of compensation when you make that purchase, and we do thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, June in Ireland, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, and Keith in Alabama.
There's also Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, and Joe in Maryland. Thank you all so much for the support.
Thank you, indeed.
Also, make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. You can subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcasting app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, well, your reviews of Pan's Labyrinth, apparently, to barnabin@theprancingponypodcast.com.
And if you would like your voice literally heard, just send over your audio questions. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod. Record your questions for us. Please be sure to still email them to Barlin.
That's right. Now, even though Barlin's been a lot more reliable, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we can. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
I have been Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and before I sign off, I just want to give a huge thank you. The questions after Nightfall are some of my absolute favorite times to record these podcasts. It's very cool being here with so many other people that, while Alan is lovely to hang out with all of the time, there is something about having an audience here that lets me know that I'm not just talking to a webcam. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for having me back. I have been Don Marshall, and that has been my fake dad, Alan Sisto.